Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the rhythm of rapport. And you know what? These are little secrets. These are the finesse things in your business that's going to allow you to convert leads into clients faster. So these aren't the big hard skills, that you spend all at the beginning of your entrepreneurship career or your, being a professional consultant. These are the fine skills. And when you master them, you'll be amazed at how much your results improve. I want to introduce Jake Stahl. He's a pioneer in conversational dynamics and a highly regarded fractional chief learning officer. Haven't heard that one before. He is revolutionizing sales through his adaptive conversational blueprint, and he turns sales professionals into relational architects. Ooh, delicious words. I love delicious words. Capable of forging profound connections with prospects. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thank you, Kim, for having me. It's quite an honor to be here.
Jake, I think we're going to just hop into your story a little bit because this sounds pretty fascinating. You do something that very few people actually do. So, how did you become a fractional chief learning officer?
I'd love to say it was intentional, but it was really by accident. I was a salesperson in 4 different large companies, and I was number 1 in 3 of the 4. I'm still a little bitter about the 4th, but I took a training and development role in that 4th company. And I stayed with that company for 16 years, but became a real kind of accidental authority on things like training and development, adult learning principles, conversational dynamics. And after 16 years with that company, they had gone through 4 rounds of downsizing. And I was a victim of one of those 4 rounds. And at that point, it was like, God, you can go back out into the corporate market, or you can kind of try and swim on your own. As Cortez says, you can burn those ships. So I stayed in corporate for a little while and started side gigs. And then it just got to the point where corporate America was no longer for me. So I took up a role doing a lot of consulting and working in C-suite roles. But fractional wasn't really a thing until about a year and a half ago. And I remember hearing the definition for the first time, and I went downstairs and said to my wife, apparently I'm a thing called fractional. But I've been that way for about 10 years now. But even though the movement is relatively young, I've been doing it for quite a while.
What I've been hearing a lot lately is that being in corporate anymore is not the place to be. I think there was a time when, corporate was the be all and end all, but now a lot of people are saying, you know what, it's just not worth the cost to my health. It's not worth the cost to my family. It's not worth the stress and how difficult it is. And I think, if you're in that position and you do have expertise, I think you've got options. And I love that today there are options for you, that just being corporate is not the only way to go.
Yeah, I would agree, Kim. And I think for the longest time, we all had this umbilical to the corporate America. It fed us sustenance. It gave us our benefits. It gave us everything we needed. And it was almost like hiding under mom's apron. You were safe back there and you had the security of it, but there's no security anymore. And no. I consult with fractionals and I coach fractionals all the time on how to get started. And I have a lot of individual clients in this area. And the one thing they always tell me is that I'm afraid to take that step. And my response back is usually, aren't you afraid now? I mean, the company, you could get a 4.0 on your performance review. And then the company tomorrow could say, hey, Jake, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And you're done. So yeah. It's really about your tolerance, I guess, for risk and your ability to be able to say, if I fail on my own. I'm not doing outstanding and then having somebody say, well, you did outstanding, but you're not. So I think it's a calculated risk, Kim, but there's a certain, to your point, freedom to it. I don't think there's any less stress. I just think that you have more control over your destiny than you do with a corporate job.
I do agree about the stress, but, and don't get me wrong, it is stressful. I've been an entrepreneur a long time. I understand the stress. I actually went through a period of time where I was in a merge with my heart beating almost 200 beats per minute. And they said, you got to get rid of stress. So I've learned how to get rid of stress. But I think the difference is that, yes, there is stress, but at least when you're in control, then you have resources to be able to deal with that stress, take your business to the next level. You don't have a ceiling because, in corporate, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with corporate. Some people love being in corporate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, the ability to be able to determine your own future is scary. It's exciting. Yes, it's stressful. But I think if you go the route from the beginning of working with good mentors, that was part of my problem, is I didn't have anyone to mentor me. I just had to fail my way forward the hard way. And,
right.
now I'm doing things a little bit differently. I work with specialists. I want to do something new in my business. I work with specialists. They give me feedback. They have me over the humps a lot quicker. We get things moving, the accountability. So I love the fact that you're working with these fractionals to help them be able to build out a consultancy so that they can be successful, so that they don't have the same stress or the worry that one day they're going to come in and, they're going to hand them a box and say, pack up your desk.
Yeah. And it's funny, Kim, you just hit on a great point. They come in and tell you, they come in and have you, when we're in corporate America, we're told we're successful or we're told we're a failure. So even if we do our best, and even if we're exceptional at what we do, if we get the wrong person, or the company just says, hey, we're not giving out 4.0s on our performance reviews this year, so you get a 2.5, everybody's always telling you what you are. In this, I'm telling me who I am. So if I do great, it's because of me. If I do lousy, it's because of me. And I kick myself in the pants and I move forward. But nobody is telling me anymore who or what I am. I determine that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I want to just shift gears here because I want to give us lots of time to talk about the rhythm of rapport.
Sure.
And one of the things, like I said at the beginning, is this is a very soft skill. And when we're in entrepreneurship, in the beginning, you've just got so much to learn, right? Like you've got to learn all the big stuff. But it's the fine stuff that changes your numbers. And, when you look at conversion in a sales call, it's the soft skills that allow you to convert at a higher rate than the hard skills, right? One of the things I realized that was really powerful for me was no matter what was going on the inside, if I could stay calm on the outside, if I could stay relaxed, like, when I do sales calls, sometimes I even slouch. I just slouch back in the chair, right? You want to give that attitude. When I gave that attitude that I don't care whether you sign with me or not, more people signed with me.
No question. Yeah, absolutely.
When it was like, hey, let's have a sales conversation. And at the end, they're expecting the pitch. And I'm like, how do you want to move forward? And they tell me, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes they don't have the time. Usually they don't have the money. But, I give them things so that when they leave the conversation, I've created rapport with them. I've given them something valuable. I give them a tool to help them earn more money so that they can come back to me and write the book that they want to write. So I think, today's discussion is, I think is really crucial in terms of, when you're that professional, when you're that consultant, when you're that speaker, when you're that coach, when you're that entrepreneur, it's the soft skills that matter. So I'm going to let you loose for a little bit. I want you to talk about the rhythm of rapport and how does that play into the sales calls and making the meaningful connections?
Well, Kim, the reason I got into this was twofold. The first was I was always frustrated, and this is going to sound really weird, but I was always frustrated with the question, "Hi, how are you?" It struck me that it wasn't relevant. Nobody wanted to hear my answer unless it was like somebody really close. And it took the place of a more quality greeting. And more importantly, Kim, it added a step of conditioning to the way we respond, right? Because when we hear, "Hi, how are you?" we have that conditioned response. It's thoughtless. My wife and I were out shopping the other day, and I walked next to a gentleman, and our eyes met. And I nodded and I said, "Hey." And he said, "Fine, thanks. How are you?" So in his head, this conversation took place. And over the years, this has frustrated me with, why do salespeople open up with, "How are you?" Because it literally signals the gong. I am going to sell you, and I don't care about the answer right after I'm going to give you my pitch. So I kind of dedicated my life and my career, and I've been doing this a long time, Kim, 30 years, 6 different countries, probably over 10,000 people at this point. I dedicated my career to, how do we get beyond that conditioning? How do we learn that rapport building quickly and easily? And the one thing I found, Kim, is it's about rhythm. It's about the back and forth created in a conversation. So it has nothing to do with content in the beginning. In the beginning, nobody cares about content. It's a back and forth. It's a trust building. And until we establish that trust to some degree, what we have to say honestly doesn't matter. And if you think about the sales pitches you've been given over the years, "Hi, Kim, it's Jake Stahl from Jake Stahl Consulting. I wanted to see what you thought about your sales training." It's right into it. We've got no established value.
Wall fell.
Right? Exactly. So all your preconditioning kicks in. You're like, "This costs too much. It's not the right time. I got to talk to my partner. I don't need any. I've got too much. I bought some yesterday." So how do we get beyond that? And everything that I've done over the past couple of years, or the past 30 years, has really developed around this. The other part, Kim, with rapport and the rhythm is that every 10 minutes you talk, you generate about 2 minutes worth of questions in the other person's head. So for every 60-minute talk you give, you generate about 12 minutes worth of questions. So if I'm giving a pitch or I'm talking to you just as a person, I want to try and get those questions out of the way, because there's nothing worse than getting a question in your head, and the rest of the time you're listening to that person, all you can do is think, "But what if?" But you didn't answer my question. So everything that I do now, including my adaptive conversational blueprint, talks about conditioning, developing a rapport, establishing a firm back and forth with people, and then, and only then, delivering content.
I'm going to stop you there, Jake, because, there was a couple of things that it crossed my mind while you were talking. So the first one is, when your wife says she's fine, that is not an automated response.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
That is there is something majorly wrong, and you better pick up on it quickly, bud.
Yeah, without a doubt.
The second thing I was thinking of was, sometimes rapport is doing things differently. One of the things I noticed in my sales calls is, we'd start the conversation, and, everybody was expecting me just to get into, the presentation. And I just sit back and I'm like, "Hey, tell me about yourself." Yeah. Right. And I just sit back, I relax, and I let them talk. And I let them decide what they want to tell me. And sometimes I'll, you ask a few questions if you need clarification, but they're like, it catches them off guard because they're expecting me to go into the sales pitch. But, when you talked about the questions that are in people's brains, it always hits a point when we're talking about books and they don't want to ask the question. They never want to ask the money question. I can see it. Like, the conversation stalls out. So I just look at them and I said, "I bet I know what the next 2 questions you have in your brain are." I say, you want to know how much money it's going to cost and how long it's going to take? And they smile at me and I'm like, I know exactly what question, right? And so I just answer it simply. I think it's, like you said, if you're not giving time, one of the things I thought of is allowing people time just to ask the questions. If your sales pitch just keeps going on and you never stop and you never let them ask questions, to me, it ruins the sales call.
Yeah. And Kim, to your point, I think this is why sales gets such a negative connotation, is because sales is equated with push, stress, make an immediate decision. And so people think, A, I don't ever want to be in sales and I can't sell myself. And B, I don't want to be contacted by a salesperson. There was just a study done by the Gartner Group that said, I think it was close to 80% of people said they'd rather buy something without a salesperson being involved. And I get it, 100%. As salespeople, we've made our own bed with this. And that's part of the reason that this whole 2-10 rule I've developed came into play, is it's all based on the fact that salespeople just traditionally don't listen. And honestly, when you're building a business, Kim, and it sounds like you're acutely aware of this, when you're building a business, finance is important, VC is important, understanding how to do your taxes is important, but active listening, that should be your first priority.
Yes.
Absolutely first priority.
Yeah, and not active listening to try and overcome an objection before Correct. They give it to you.
Yep. Yeah.
One of my clients, Larry Levine, he wrote the book Selling from the Heart. I love what he talks about. He says, don't reek of commission breath and give a rip about your clients.
I like that. I may have to use that. That's very good.
Oh, I want you to give, okay, it's going to be one of those mornings where the brain and the lips are not connecting well. Jake, I would love for you to share a few practical how-tos. So How do you create this rhythm of rapport? Like if you've never done this before, if you've been taught, the hard sales and, and someone's listening to this and they go, that's great, but how do I do it?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So the first one is, let's just take a look at the human condition just for a second, because this is integral to how to do it. Is we will tend to spend more time investigating luxury than we will practicality. So we'll spend a ton of time researching Amazon for a product we want to buy, or we'll look 100 different ways at how to do a vacation that we want to go on. Or, if we're dating, we'll go online and we'll look at everything about that person to try and get up to date. But with our customers or the people that are going to generate revenue, we spend no time at all. As a matter of fact, we boil it down to a math game. Hey, I close 1 out of every 50 people, so I make 100 calls, I get 2 closes. Kim, it's insanity. So the first thing I would say as a practical tip is treat each phone call as if it's the only call of the day.
Yeah.
Do whatever research it takes. And here's a great how-to. So we talked about eliminating hi, how are you in the beginning. So let's think about this another way. Let's say you and I are talking for the first time. You pick up the phone. Hello, Kim, I literally couldn't wait till you picked up the phone. I've listened to your podcast over and over, including the latest edition. And I'm just really excited to ask you a couple of questions if you're okay with that. That is so much different than Kim, hi, how are you? It's Jake Stahl. So if we have that opening, that trust and rapport is starting to be built right away. Tip number 2 is set a stopwatch. Don't talk about yourself or what you offer for a good 2 to 4 minutes. Just dedicate that time to asking about them. And if you have to pre-cook the questions, go ahead. But you'll find most of the time you can figure out questions to ask. So Kim, how long have you been doing this? Hey, I see you have Extraordinary Word Ninja as your title on this StreamYard. Tell me a little bit about that. And that's really cool wording. So if I can build that rapport with you, here's what's going to happen. After about 2 to 4 minutes, you're going to go, Jake, we've talked a lot about me and I haven't heard anything about you. And then all of a sudden, your interest in my message is going to be at its peak.
Yes.
So I think if we spend the time to listen and build that trust and rapport, it's going to be so important to the message we put across. So we're no longer saying, hey, I gave 100 messages today and 2 people bit. We're saying, hey, I gave 10 messages today over the past 3 or 4 hours, and 2 of those people bit.
Yeah.
When I look at a sales team, when they say, oh, I have to have 20 people all doing 50 calls a piece because that's just the way we do things, my question always comes back to, if they only made 8 calls a day, but they made 2 closes, what's the difference between that and doing 200 calls a day and 2 closes? The difference is your rapport building is awesome. Now, how do we scale up the number of calls, right? 2 closes a day is 2 closes a day, whether I make 50 or 8 calls.
Yeah.
Rapport is huge. So I guess I would say as my tips, active listen, let the people talk for 2 to 4 minutes before you talk, and don't use past failures of closing 2 out of every 50 people become what your projection is for the coming year.
You just unpacked something there, because, when you're in our profession, it is so easy to hit yourself over the head with every time you fail.
No question.
And I had to decide at one point, I realized that I was failing my way forward. So yeah, I was failing, but I was moving forward. So as long as I was still moving forward, now I wasn't moving forward as fast as I wanted to move forward. But I finally made the decision that as long as I was moving forward, I was okay with the failure.
Right.
And I think, if you don't have that mentorship, right? And that's where the mentorship makes the huge difference, when you don't have to go it alone. I went alone. When I started out, I was in network marketing and MLM for about 15 years. And I did it when the kids were little because I could stay at home and work and still be mom. And there were 2 companies in specific that I had joined over those 15 years. And the person had promised to mentor me. I chose to join under that person because they specifically said they would mentor me. Like, I was really clear on what I wanted. I wanted someone who was going to teach and train me how to sell, and someone who was going to teach and train me how to recruit. I would put in all the time required. I would do anything ethically, morally, legally that they asked me to do. But I would do it. And in 2 companies, they promised me. I mean, I approached, not the top leaders, but sort of that undergroup, somebody in that undergroup of top leaders, who was doing very well. And I said, listen, I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to do the time. I'm willing to learn. And so I joined under this person. And guess what happened?
You didn't get what we expected, right?
They told me to go out and talk to people. Yay, as if I didn't already know that. Yeah. But I didn't know how to talk to people. I just wanted someone to show me how to talk to people. Right. In the beginning, I always worked well with scripts. So give me a script. Show me how to do the script. Let me nail that script, and then I would adjust it, right? Finally, the last company I was in, one of the reasons I joined this company is because they had district managers who were paid employees of the company in each district locally within an hour of you. And their job was to teach and train you how to build a business. And guess what happened? I built a business. But then towards the end, I actually quit it because I fell into publishing. And I realized it was my calling. It was my dream. It was everything that I was meant to be. So, I kind of left that aside, and not there was anything wrong with it, but I just realized that I was called to be on a new path. but I was so thankful for that mentoring, that leadership, someone who could help me over all of the humps. And I think that's what you do, Jake. You help the people over the humps. You get them through so that they're actually enjoying success quicker.
Yeah, and I'm a lot like you, Kim, in that when I started, my mentor was mistakes. Just make a mistake, learn from it or don't. And I'm going to be honest, I made some mistakes over and over, thinking, well, if I just do it again, this will work this time.
Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Yeah. Oh, insanity is absolutely correct. And I think as entrepreneurs, we face a significant battle, especially in this age of working in our homes, is we don't have that benchmark or that water level to look at with other people, because we look at their LinkedIn or their Facebook and we go, oh my God, they're successful. And so we think, why aren't we there?
Yeah.
So I think our benchmark needs to be shifted, Kim, in that how were we yesterday? That should be the benchmark. It shouldn't be how we perceive other people are doing. It's what's the reality of how we're doing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I so agree. We're going to shift gears here, Jake, because we've got a few minutes left, but I want to talk about your book. So first of all, you've part of a co-author book and you're working on your own book. So tell us about those two.
So the co-authored book is the Life Coach's Toolkit Volume 2. I was honored to be among 25 authors who put this book together, and the authors were from all over the world. And my particular chapter was on my 210 rule, which is how to establish that rhythm in a conversation and how to do it effectively. So after the publication of that book, which became a bestseller, which we were super proud of, I thought I would start writing my own book. So my own book is going to be In Search of the Perfect Conversation. So how to establish rapport and build that trust with someone quickly and easily within a couple of minutes, and then how to maintain it. And it will talk about everything from how to take the picture you use on Zoom to start establishing trust, or as Robert Cialdini put it, persuasion, how to start your persuasion before you actually talk to them, all the way through building and maintaining a relationship.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, Jake, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every single author that comes on the show. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So you did a chapter in one book and you're currently working on your own book. So you can answer this question for either one. But what has been the good, the bad, and the ugly of writing, editing, and publishing a book?
I will say the good is seeing your name on the book when it comes to your door. Like, I bought the books so that I could give out some to my friends, and seeing your name on the book is just unbelievable. It's hard to imagine that you are now an author. And what's even more satisfying, Kim, is when you get to set up your author profile on Amazon and you're now listed as an author on Amazon. So just the high is indescribable, and it's so worth all the effort that went into it. The bad is that it's a labor of love. If you're doing it to make money, it may not be your best option, depending on how much you want to put into it or how much marketing you want to put into it. So part of it is just getting mentions. It's putting it in your biography that you've written a book. But I would say the monetary side is not the side that I'm going to be counting my blessings for. The ugly part is that, for me anyway, I wanted to keep redoing it. So I would do my chapter and the publisher would come back and say, this is great. This looks good. Let's leave it as it is. And then I'd reread it or read it out loud to my wife. And I'm like, I got to redo this. This is terrible. So then we redo it. And the publisher comes back and goes, okay, I could take one rewrite. All right. But this one looks good. Everything's fine. Then you look at it again. You're like, this is bad. So the ugly, I guess, is my own self-criticism and wanting to pursue that perfection.
Yes, I have a word for that with my clients. It's called analysis paralysis.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And you know what? Done is always better than perfect.
That's what I'm learning.
Here's the thing, like, it will never be perfect. And you will go back one day and you'll look at it and you still probably won't be happy with it, but you'll recognize that was your first. Okay, we do things better the second. And then a few years after the second, you look at the second, you go, that ain't good enough. You do the third.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is no such thing as perfect. It's recognizing that, what you have to say is important to your target market, but it doesn't have to be said perfectly. It just has to be said by you. And I think that, when my clients realize that, it really sets them free and they don't feel like they have to super analyze it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, it has to be good, has to be great. I would even say excellent. But perfect should not be a word in your vocabulary when it comes to writing and publishing a book.
You brought up an interesting point, Kim, in that, when you look at it and you look back on it 2 years later and you say, now I'm going to write something better. I think it's funny too, because I've had to learn to take other people's perspective over my own. When my wife read it, she's like, Jake, this is really, really good. And when my publisher read it, he's like, Jake, this is really, really good. But in my head, I'm like, come on, you've got no feedback whatsoever. It can't be that good. So I think the self-criticism really can cripple you, and you have to learn to take other people's word that it's good enough to go as it is, and you're going to be fine.
I agree.
And that was a hard lesson to learn. Big, big, hard lesson to learn.
Jake, we are just about out of time here. I've so enjoyed today's conversation.
Me too.
I would love for you to give a final thought, and then if you have a freebie or something you'd like to direct the audience to, now's a good time to do it.
Sure. So I guess the final thought would be just reviewing one we talked about earlier. If you really want your communication skills to excel, don't worry about talking. And if you really want your business to excel as an entrepreneur, don't worry about selling. Show the interest in another person. Be interested, not interesting. And I think you'll find that that's really the key to success. It doesn't happen fast, but it does happen, which I think is the end result we're all looking for. If anybody does need help with this, if anybody's looking for that consult to help them get going or to help them get their business off the ground, they can go to my website, which is jakestahlconsulting.com, and they can book a free hour with me. I'll give you an hour of my time, and wherever that goes, it goes. If we do business, great. If I refer you to somebody else, great. If it was just an hour where you took some gold nuggets, great. Either way, I made a new connection, so have you. And hopefully we're better people for it.
I love it, Jake. I do the exact same thing. Jake, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a joy and a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you, Kim. It was my pleasure as well.
Audience, it's that time again. Where are you going to go from here? So if you've made it to the end of the episode, I highly recommend that you go back, listen to episode 505, Escaping Founder-Led Sales. So once you get sales down yourself and your company's going really good, what's the next step? You get a sales team and you teach them how to do the same thing that you know how to do so you can exponentially increase your results. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you know the routine. My daughter has placed a thumbnail here for you to click. Where it gets placed, I have no clue. But one of these days I will figure it out. One of these days I'll just take the time to ask her where she puts it. But if you're on your favorite podcast app, you're only going to scan back about 8 episodes. Thank you so much for listening today, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.